So recently, a story broke that John Durham, who's a special investigator that's looking into the Russia investigation, started to file indictments on several people, including a lawyer for the law firm Perkins Coie that was hired by the Hillary Clinton campaign. That lawyer's name is Sussman, and in one of the motions that was filed here just last weekend, I believe on February 11th, we saw that there were some striking allegations. Trump took these allegations, as did people at Fox News and people like myself, to show that Hillary Clinton's team actually was spying on Trump's team with the express purpose of concocting the Russian collusion narrative. Now, Hillary Clinton has responded. What happened was we saw almost every mainstream network and almost every Democrat that pushed the Russia collusion hoax decided to be quiet about this story. And as I predicted on my live show, they would do so until someone came forward and did some form of debunking, and then they would all, like parrots, repeat it. And so that's exactly what we saw happen. There were people at the New York Times that first did it after sitting on the story for several days. And then the story was picked up in various forms by various other media outlets that coincidentally were instrumental in pushing the Russia collusion hoax. So I thought it was interesting here. We see that Hillary Clinton herself got into this game by tweeting out that this was debunked. So I want to read her tweet. And then what I want to do is go through the article that she sources saying that it's debunked the claims that her campaign was spying on Trump. And we'll see if that's really the case. So you can see her tweet here. It says, quote, "Trump and Fox are desperately spinning up a fake scandal to distract from his real ones. So it's a day that ends in Y. The more his misdeeds are exposed, the more they lie. For those interested in reality, here's a good debunking of their latest nonsense." And you can see that it links to a Vanity Fair article. Now, when I read this article, I was ready to read it, and I was skeptical because I think that the allegations and the indictment speaks for itself that we saw from Durham, but I was willing to hear what the other side had to say. So when I go to this article, you'll notice the first thing that it says up top. So this is going to be by Bess Levin. This is on February 15th. Again, 3 or 4 days after the allegations came out. So no media other than right-wing media covered this story whatsoever until about this time, about the 15th, which was a couple days ago. But look what it says. You can see right here at the top, it says conspiracy theory. So that's how they're citing it. This is information from an indictment. Now, anytime there was an indictment surrounding anyone connected to the Trump campaign, even before it went to a jury or anything like that, people assumed that it was true, at least people like at Vanity Fair, Hillary Clinton, the mainstream media, etc. But here it's different. They say, oh, this is just a conspiracy theory. The real conspiracy theory was the one that was pushed for 4+ years, that Trump was a vassal of Vladimir Putin, was just a puppet of his, and all of the information now that we know came from the Hillary campaign. But some of us, like me, had been talking about that since 2017, that saw evidence that this was fake, it was a hoax, and it was concocted. So that was the real conspiracy theory. But let's go on here. It says, "You'll never believe it, but Hillary Clinton did not, in fact, spy on Trump's White House. In less breaking news, Donald Trump remains a moron." So we could already see that this is going to be a very serious piece of journalism, right? Claiming conspiracy theory, calling Donald Trump a moron in the sub-headline. So great job by Bess Levin here. And this isn't just some random person that I picked. This is literally the article that Hillary Clinton is claiming debunked what she's talking about. Now, I'll put the article in the description so you could read it for yourself. We're not going to go through the whole article, but let's just show you the length of it. That's it. Very short article. Most of it's a quote from a New York Times, or a big portion of it is a quote from the New York Times. So I'll just ask you, because I have limited time here, to say that I encourage you all to read it, but literally nothing they say in the article here is debunking. They don't even attempt to debunk. They don't even make a claim attempting to debunk anything until this paragraph right here that starts with the word strangely. And that's when they start to make claims. Now, these are claims that are largely not backed up with evidence, and each of these claims is just going to be one sentence. But I want to go through and see what the crux of their argument is as to why this was debunked. So we'll go through here. It says, "Strangely, there wasn't a lot of fact-checking going down at Mar-a-Lago. But the actual reason that the mainstream media hasn't covered this story was likely because, as the Times notes," so again, as I said before, they don't actually do their own journalism or own thinking. They wait for one person, this particular person at the New York Times, to say something, and then they all repeat it. And Hillary Clinton has chosen this Vanity Fair piece to say that this is what debunks the allegations that her team had paid to spy on the Trump team and concoct the Trump-Russia collusion narrative. So let's see what she says. Number 1. Sussman's conversation with the CIA had already been reported last October. And that's true. There was an indictment of Sussman that largely people say came about was because what Sussman was indicted for, and the only indictment we have pertaining him or this information right now, is that while he was compiling this information and talking to the CIA and the FBI and other assets about this, He was asked by the FBI, are you working for anyone in particular? To which he responded, no. And yet Durham has found that actually that's not true, that he was working and being paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and people at the DNC. So he lied to the FBI. That's what the indictment says. So the first defense they hear of the revelations that we now hear, that there was spying on Trump's campaign, that you had this person, his name was Rodney Jaffe, who was a tech executive that was working with Sussman and on behalf of the Hillary Clinton team to use, he was tasked with researching DNS data for the executive office of the president, but he exploited that data for the express purpose of concocting a story that Trump was colluding with Russia. In other words, imagine if you hire someone to beef up security in your home, and while they're there, they get access to a bunch of your private information, then release it to people that dislike you so that they can release it to the press and get you in trouble. That's in effect what was going on. This is spying. That's what it was. Improperly using data that he had access to that was non-public data. And we'll get to exactly what the Durham indictment said here in a minute. So the first thing they say is, well, we already talked about Sussman in October, and they spent 4 years talking about Trump-Russia collusion. They didn't say, oh, we already talked about that for a year, so we're done with it. So even if they talked about it before, that's not debunking what's said. And secondly, what was talked about prior did not have the bit about Rodney Jaffe, this tech executive working with Sussman and the Clinton campaign in order to use data improperly to concoct a Russia-Trump collusion story. So no, that part hasn't been talked about. So regardless how you look at it, that's not debunking, as Hillary Clinton said. Number two, it says, Durham never once said anything about the White House being infiltrated. And that's true. The Fox News article, as I'll show here, that people were talking about, and I made this mistake as well. You can see here at the top, it says, Clinton campaign paid to infiltrate, and it's in quotes. Actually, they are absolutely correct in this, that Durham never uses the word infiltrate. That is absolutely correct. However, what Durham does say is that he improperly used this data that he had access to that was private data in places like Trump Tower, a healthcare provider, Trump's home, his apartment, and the office of the president. So just because they didn't use the word infiltrated, it still doesn't answer. And you can see the shady trick that's going on here. They're like, well, the word infiltrate wasn't used, so this is debunked. No, it still says that he got access to this DNS data, and he used it improperly in order to concoct a Trump-Russia collusion narrative on behest of the Hillary Clinton campaign. It says that. Just because it doesn't use the word infiltrate doesn't mean that this has been debunked. So that's point two that makes no sense. Point three. It says, the special counsel also never claimed the Clinton campaign had paid Jaffe's company. Now, this is also technically true. Jaffe's company was called Newstar, and the indictment doesn't say that Newstar was paid directly through the DNC. However, it does say several things, as I'll get to in a minute here. It says that the reason Jaffe did this was to please, quote, a very VIPs who they found through his emails were, one, Perkins Coie, the law firm that was hired by the Clinton Foundation or the Clinton campaign, and second, Clinton and her team itself. So Jaffe was doing this at the behest of the Clinton people. Number two, he was working directly with Sussman. That's why this information's in the indictment of Sussman. Sussman was, in fact, being paid by Hillary Clinton. And he was the person that was running around taking this information that his partner Jaffe was obtaining illegally, was using illegally. He might have had access to the data legally, but he was using it illegally. And he was taking that private data and he was shopping it around to the media and shopping it around to intel agency groups to prompt spying and investigations into Donald Trump. So the argument, well, Jaffe technically wasn't paid directly by Hillary Clinton or by Hillary's team. Well, nonetheless, he was working hand in hand with a man who was being paid. And Jaffe also says in later emails that he thought that he was going to be given a position in the burgeoning Hillary Clinton campaign. So had Hillary won, he thought he would be given a position. And also he worked with Georgia Tech. As we'll see in the indictment, it doesn't mention the name, but he was working with people from Georgia Tech to analyze this data. This started in July of 2016. In November of 2016, Georgia Tech got a $17 million cybersecurity contract from the government. So they were rewarded handsomely by the Obama administration for their efforts in concocting the Trump-Russia collusion story. And the fourth way and the final way, and they say most important way that this is debunked, quote, the filing never said the White House data came under scrutiny was from the Trump era. In fact, lawyers from the data scientists who helped develop the analysis in question said this happened during, wait for it, the Obama presidency. Now, let's think about what they're saying here. So, basically, we're going to go over for a second here to the actual claims from the Durham investigation. And I want to read this, but keep that fourth one in mind. This is from Fox News, reporting on the Durham filing. The filing revealed that Sussman and the tech executive, who's Rodney Jaffe, had met and communicated with another law partner who was serving as general counsel to the Clinton campaign. Sources told Fox News that lawyer is Mark Elias, who worked at Perkins Coie. Durham's filing states that in 2016, the tech executive worked with Sussman, a U.S. investigative firm obtained by Law Firm One on behalf of the Clinton campaign, numerous cyber researchers, and employees at multiple internet companies to assemble the purported data in white papers. Quote, in connection with these efforts, Tech Executive One, again Jaffe, exploited his access to non-public and or proprietary internet data. In other words, it may have been data that he was legally allowed to be looking at, but he exploited that private data for his own personal goals. Tech Executive One also enlisted the assistance of researchers at a U.S.-based university who are receiving and analyzing large amounts of internet data in connection with a pending federal government cybersecurity contract. Tech Executive One tasked these researchers to mine internet data to establish an inference or a narrative tying then-candidate Trump to Russia, Durham states. In doing so, Tech Executive One indicated that he was seeking to please, quote, certain VIPs, referring to individuals at Law Firm One and the Clinton campaign. Now, this is a far cry from the perception you would get if you read the Vanity Fair article, which again, Hillary Clinton sings debunking. When you read this, they just say things like, well, Jaffe wasn't paid by the Hillary camp. And yet Durham specifically says that he was improperly using this data, private data, from Trump-connected things to concoct the Trump-Russia collusion scenario. So it hardly seems to be any defense whatsoever. It also says that the filing, the most important part, that this White House data was from when Obama was president, not Trump. So let's get to exactly what's said. Durham also writes that during Sussman's trial, the government will establish that among the Internet Data Executive One and his associates exploited were the DNS internet traffic pertaining to 1, a particular healthcare provider, 2nd, Trump Tower, 3rd, Donald Trump's Central Park West apartment building, and 4th, the Executive Office of the President of the United States. Durham states that the internet company and Tech Executive One worked for, quote, had come to access and maintain dedicated servers for the Executive Office of the President, quote, as part of a sensitive arrangement where it provided DNS resolution services to the President. So in other words, the Office of the President hired Jaffe and his firm, Neustar, to do DNS data for the purposes of protecting it, but then they were exploiting that data to go after Donald Trump, as you could read in the next paragraph. Tech Executive One and his associates exploited this arrangement by mining the EOP's DNS traffic and the other data for the purpose of gathering derogatory information about Donald Trump. So they were using this data from the office of the presidency in order to mine derogatory evidence about Donald Trump. And why were they doing this? Well, as it said earlier in the indictment, the reason they were doing this was to, quote, Tech Executive One indicated that he was seeking to please certain VIPs, referring to individuals at Perkins Coie and the Clinton campaign. That's why they were doing this. So just because he may have had access to this, he was doing things beyond the scope of what his job was. His job was just to provide security, to look at files. Instead, he was taking those files, giving that information to the Clinton campaign, giving that information to places like in the CIA, and that information then gets leaked to the press in order to smear Trump. Remember, Jake Sullivan, who was one of the point people that Rodney Jaffe was talking to, who is now the national security advisor to Joe Biden that's trying to lead us into a proxy war with Russia, he was tweeting out before the election, and Hillary Clinton was retweeting Jake Sullivan before the election in October of 2016, the Trump Alpha Bank story. So despite what you hear Democrats say all the time of, well, none of these allegations or the investigation broke until after the election. That's not true. They'd already started their mission of smearing Trump as colluding with Russia through this Alpha Bank story as early as October of 2016. But what you can see is the defense to all of this is saying the filing of the EOP data was when Obama was in office and not when Trump was in office. Now, I will concede, it does not say specifically that while this EOP data that, according to the indictment, was being exploited in nefarious ways for the purpose of attacking Donald Trump, it doesn't specifically say if that EOP data was from when Obama was in office, from when Trump was in office, or both. That's technically true. It doesn't say that. However, it still says that it was being exploited. But let's steelman our opponent for a second and say, okay, fair enough. So they weren't spying on Trump while he was in the Oval Office. Even if that's the case, and this is the important part, look at the places they admit that they were spying on him. A healthcare provider, Trump Tower, and Donald Trump's apartment. Now, if we go back to the Vanity Fair piece, or if you go to any of the pieces that have, quote, debunked this story, you'll notice that none of them whatsoever talk about Trump Tower being spied on, Trump's apartment being spied on. They're all taking one small piece of this, the part that says also the executive office of the presidency was spied upon. They exploited their access to that in order to smear Donald Trump, taking that information to places like the Clinton campaign. And they're going, aha! But the person who was in the Oval Office while that exploitation of that data was occurring was actually Barack Obama. So this entire story is debunked. But it's not that simple. Even if that's the case, it's still exploiting that Oval Office data in order to go after a candidate for president of the United States. And they still don't answer the allegations that there was spying on Trump Tower and Trump's apartment. Nowhere in this Vanity Fair piece, nor in the piece from the New York Times or the other pieces, does it mention even once the fact that Trump Tower and Trump's apartment was being spied on. They just keep saying, oh, people are erroneously saying that Durham said that the office of the president was being spied on, implying that that means it was when Trump was in office. But if Trump wasn't in office, it's debunked. No scandal. That's not true. You could read this whole Vanity Fair piece. You see the 4 points that I went over. It doesn't debunk this whatsoever. There was an actual coup. There was an actual insurrection. As I've said from the get-go, as bad as things could have been January 6th, and I deplore all political violence, it's being blown massively out of proportion so that tyrannical authoritarians in the establishment like the Biden administration could have a new domestic war on terror and use this as a soapbox to enact all sorts of authoritarian policies that they want. But the reality is, whatever you think of January 6th, it didn't stymie the administration that was incoming whatsoever. People say, well, Hillary Clinton actually conceded. Did she? Or did she set up through the intel agencies and through her team a never-ending 4-year investigation of Trump that stymied his political agenda, that probably cost Republicans the 2018 election, that could have cost them the 2020 election, and turned the media into propagandists that spent 4 years breathing that Russians were under every bed and scaring people into thinking that Donald Trump might be in league with one of our enemies and could cause nuclear wars and things like that? This is more of an effective of a coup or an insurrection than anything anyone's accused of doing January 6th. When this story breaks, the fact that the same people that wanted to push the Trump-Russia collusion story for 4 years were dead silent on it until, as I predicted, one person says something and then they all parrot it, and even this, quote, debunking does nothing whatsoever to debunk these allegations. I challenge anyone to find anywhere in this Vanity Fair piece where Hillary Clinton herself, through a tweet, which I'll remind you right here, claims is debunking Trump's claims that her team spied on him. Show me once where that's the case. It just says, well, we already reported on this, and we're not sure that Jaffe is directly paid by them. And anyways, when they were exploiting data from the Oval Office, it was while Obama was there. And yet they ignore that Trump Tower and Trump's apartment was also having their data being exploited. And also ignore the fact that it says that an indictment says that the entire Trump-Russia narrative was cooked up intentionally by people that were being paid for through the Hillary Clinton campaign. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I'll be putting some more videos up on YouTube as time goes by. Also, check out my live streams that I do normally around 8 p.m. Eastern Time almost every weekday. Thanks so much, everyone, and as always, have a good one.